Okay, so let's look at finding the equation of a function. So what I want to do is I want to mark off on both of them where the starting point is. So in the first graph or table, I'm going to take the graph of f of x and I'm going to write down the points. We're at minus 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So the first point is minus 3, 2, reading a graph from left to right. The next point is up here, will be 0 and 4. And over here will be 6, 0. Second thing I want to do is I want to then write the points from the transform function, which is this one up here. So I look and I make sure they match, because I'm going to read the graph left to right, and I make sure they match in the same order. So the first point is minus 8 and 8. Second point, 7 and 12. And third point will be minus 5 and 4. Then what I want to do is I want to find the first differences of this graph and the first differences of this graph. So I'm going to look, I added 3, and then I added 6. On this side, I added 2, and I subtracted 4. I'm going to do the same thing with this table. I added 1, I added 2. Sorry, this should be minus 7. From 8 to 12, I'm going to add 4. From 12 to 4, I'm going to subtract 8. I'm going to use the first differences in both x and both y to figure out what the stretches or compressions might be to my graph. So if I look, I have 3 and 6, and it becomes 1 and 2. So to go from 3 and 6 to 1 and 2, I'm going to divide by 3. I have 2 and minus 4, and they become 4 and minus 8. So to go from here to here, I'm going to multiply by 2. So in this table, I'm going to take my original graph, and I'm going to do divide by 3 and times by 2. So normally we would do all these tables together. We would do the original, and then we would do all the transform together. We're going to have to break it up. So if I do this and divide by 3, I get minus 1, I get 0, I get 2. I'm going to take all these values and I'm going to times them by 2. I get 4, I get 8, and I get 0. And then I'm going to look, well, how do I get from this x column to this x column? Now I'm looking for, what do I add or subtract? So I'm looking for the horizontal translation, and then I'm going to look for the vertical translation. So minus 1 to minus 8 is minus 7. Check. 0 to minus 7 is minus 7. And 2 to minus 5 is minus 7. So I'm going to subtract 7. Then I have 4, 8, and 0. They become 8, 12, and 4. What happened? I added 4. So now I can say the equation is y equals, what comes next is the stretch or compression on y. Because it's piecewise, we use f. I'm going to normally divide by 3, but in my equation I need to multiply by 3 because brackets are lying. I have x plus 7, brackets are lying, and then I'm going to add the 4 on the end. Okay, let's look at this one. So my original graph starts here, but this point gets mapped over here. So we have a little bit of a difference. They're not going in the same direction. So how does that look? So I'm going to do my original table first. I'm going to read my graph left to right. So I'm at minus 3 and 2, 0 and 4, 6, 0. But in this case, I have to start over here on the right because that's the point that matches this one. This point matches this one, and this point matches with that one. So I actually have to read this graph backwards. So this point is 4 and minus 4. This point is minus 2, minus 3. And then we have minus 14 and minus 5. You need to make sure your points match up in the right order. So now I'm going to look at the first differences for both the original and the transformed. I've added 3, I add 6. I've added 2, and I've subtracted 4. I've subtracted 6 and subtracted 12. I've added 1 and I've subtracted 2. So I know that there has to be a horizontal reflection because I had to read the points in a different order. So if I look, I have 3 and 6 here. They become minus 6 and minus 12, which means I multiply by negative 2. So you can see the horizontal reflection shows up. I have 2 and 4, negative 4. They become 1 and minus 2. So it means that I divided by 2. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this middle table. So I'm going to take all these x values and I'm going to multiply them by negative 2. So I'm going to get 6, 0, minus 12. And I'm going to divide all of these by 2. So I get 1, 2, and 0. So I look at this x column. How do I go from this x column to this one? So I subtracted 2. I have these values in y. How do they become these? I'm going to subtract 5. So my equation becomes y equals 1/2 f minus 1/2 bracket x plus 2 close bracket minus 5.